This is handwriting video number 7. In this video, we will be focusing in on the third and fourth steps of the cycle of teaching a handwriting unit. We already introduced in the previous video the introductory lesson to writing a letter properly. We did step 2, which is directed practice, the teacher guiding and making sure that the child can actually write a letter properly before going to independent work. Now we're up to the step in which the child could go from the teacher and either immediately or later on that day practice writing that letter in a workbook that is designed for letter practice. I'll be going over 3 different workbooks that we are using this year at Lamplighters. The first is the alphabet book. This will be the workbook that we are using for print lowercase and print uppercase. I'm learning cursive, which is for introducing cursive letters, both capital and lowercase. And Aleph Champ, Aleph Beis Ksiva, which we'll be using in order to teach Aleph Beis writing. If we have left the child with the directed practice and are not quite certain whether or not the child is ready to go to independent practice in a workbook, we could first start by making sure that the child could use a pencil and write 5 proper letters on a strip before he goes on to the workbook work. This is how we would do it. If I was teaching the letter A, which I did in the previous video, I would go into the bin that has my write and wipe off strips and take out a paper strip with an arrow on the left side. Then I would make sure that my child has a proper pencil, sharp with a nice eraser, and I would make 5 dots. As well as a properly formed letter A. Just like that. Then I would invite the child, with proper paper placement, to take the pencil and write 5 letter A's. The child at this point should need very little intervention from my part as a teacher of saying, oh, stay below the dotted line, oh, stay above the dark line. If the child is having a hard time making the proper letters, we could go back to the whiteboard and the sandpaper letter and the write and wipe off strips. If the child does it approximately what we're looking for, then we're ready to go on to the workbook. So let's say this particular child that I'm working with is ready now. I would then say, let's take out your alphabet book, and we're now going to practice the letter A. In the alphabet book, there are 4 pages for each letter. So for the letter A, there's an introductory page. There's a step-by-step page. There's a more practice page. And there's a capitals page. The child does not have to do all 4 of those pages in one day. They could be broken up into 4 separate days for children that have a difficult time with fine motor programming. They could be completed all in one sitting by a child who's ready to go on to the next letter. Now we'll begin by having the child first take his pencil and while the teacher is watching, write the letter A in the same way that the child did on the write and wipe off strip. In fact, this is exactly the way the write and wipe off strip looks. So the child will then do that same exact step. Then I will have the child trace each one of the dotted line letters on that page while I am watching. And on any dotted line letters, I am looking for the child to stay exactly on the dotted lines. If a child is making lines that are not exactly straight and come straight off of the dotted lines, I'll ask him to slow down. In each of these pages, there are also 4 words that have the sound for the letter that we're working with. Therefore, these 4 words all have the a sound. So I will have the child either read the word with me or guess what the word is by the picture. Bag, ag. The child will then write the A over the grade letter A in the sheet. After the student has completed this entire page, it will be then time for them to do the step-by-step page. Notice that in the step-by-step page, we practice straight lines being straight and curvy lines being curvy. So the child will start curve, 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 straight, 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 etc. And then do the dotted line practice at the bottom. At this point, the child should be able to go away from the teacher and be able to do dotted line practice and plain practice all by himself. You may need to put dots where each one of the letters goes if the child is having a hard time at first, realizing that each letter on top should line up with the letter right below. But by the first 3 or 4 letters, a child should start getting the idea of exactly where proper letter placement goes. Finally, the child will be able to complete the page of all caps together completely on his own. At the point that the child has finished all of the work for one letter, he will come to the teacher either right after he's finished or later on in the day if that's what the teacher has set up in the classroom for checking, for work checking. And the teacher will then look at each letter that the child has done. As he does this, he will be placing a tiny colored check mark over each letter that has correct letter formation. So on a child's page that looks like this, I will be determining, did the child do a proper curve, a proper line? Was it above the dotted line, below the dotted line, and above the red line? As I'm doing that, I will be putting a check next to every letter that meets my assessment. This page has this has a potential number of correct A's as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. When I'm finished, I will be putting a score, how many out of 28 this child completed with my red checks. This will give me an idea when I'm looking back through the child's handwriting workbook whether or not his correct letters out of attempts is getting better or is getting worse. If it's getting worse, I probably need to put more time and effort as a teacher into the introductory lessons, the directed practice lessons, in which I'm helping the child evaluate whether each letter is correct. Now, if I was teaching a cursive letter, my pages would look different because the cursive book begins with a different set of activities. In the cursive book, here's an example of the cursive letter E. I first practice by tracing the grade E's, then I practice on my own. Then I fill in an E into an already written word so that I get the idea of where the connectors go. When I get to the bottom, since children who are learning cursive are usually already readers, the child can look down at the bottom and say right away, did I take my time practicing the letters? Yes. Does my letter E not go above the dotted line? Yes. Does my letter E not go below the slotted line? Yes. And then I circled my best E in the work above. Child circles his best E. When the child then brings this sheet for assessment, the teacher again is looking through to see how many out of how many correct, out of how many attempted, and then also determining did the child self-evaluate himself in a way in which it is congruent with what I thought as the teacher. Finally, when a child is doing this whole process with Aleph-Beis letters, everything from every step that I discussed so far is exactly the same. But this workbook has an added component that after each practice sheet with dotted line practice and independent practice, the child actually does matching activities that show that he understands which block letter and which ksiva letter go together. This is an important difference between print and between print English and between and Aleph base.